Canon just announced the brand new 60 Mark II, the successor to the original 60, which came out 5 years ago. And in keeping with the trend of not keeping with the times, it's a little bit of a letdown. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to be a bad camera. It has a brand new 26 megapixel sensor, it has the Digic 7 processor, and it has 45 autofocus points, which are all cross-type. One of the big additions to this camera is that it has a touchscreen that swivels out, very similar to the Canon 80D, which is a very nice thing to have on this camera, which is going to be great for vloggers, especially if you're already in the Canon system. The camera also features Bluetooth, NFC, and GPS, which is an interesting thing to put in a camera in this day and age, since many people haven't really been using GPS, but it's a nice addition to this camera, which a lot of people will find useful, but in this day and age is not as important as it once was. Those 45 autofocus points that are all cross-type are great, and Canon does an amazing job with their autofocus, especially in video, but for them to be all so centered is kind of an issue. You're not getting that full frame coverage that you want out of a device that you're paying $2,000 for. So for me, that's a little bit annoying that you have to frame and reframe every time you focus something in order to get the shot you want. Plus in video mode, sure, the majority of things you want in focus are going to be in the middle, but they have to recognize that people are not always going to want to focus in the middle. So for me, again, paying $2,000 for an autofocus system that is great, but is centered so much on like the middle 30% of the frame is not giving you that 98% coverage, 96% coverage that other full frame DSLRs in the same price bracket are going to be giving you. The camera is capable of going up to 6.5 frames per second in burst mode, and you have a buffer of 21 RAW photos or 150 JPEGs. So if you're shooting action, you'll probably want to go with the JPEGs because 21 RAW photos is not that much. But if you know what you're doing, it might be perfect for you. The video on this camera maxes out at 1080p at 60 frames per second, which in 2017 is kind of a deal breaker. And another thing that is an issue that I have with this camera is that it only has one SD card slot. So it's not quite ready enough to be professional grade. And 5 years ago, that was fine. With the original 6D, people wanted to get into the full frame camera, but maybe not be a full-time photographer or take it too seriously, but maybe a serious hobby. But in this day and age where many people are using their smartphones and are not buying DSLRs or high-end mirrorless cameras, they need to pander more to their audience. And so taking these features that are expected in other brands and other higher-end cameras away from the 60 Mark II is not setting a good precedent for Canon. The lack of 4K in this camera in 2017 is also a major letdown. Canon realizes that a lot of their users are not going to be using 4K and exporting in 4K, but possibly downscaling to 1080. But even then, the benefits of 4K far outweigh not putting it in your camera. 4K has been around for quite a while now, and almost every TV on the market is 4K, so we're going to be seeing people upgrading to 4K very soon in their living rooms, but their computers are now getting up to higher than 1080p, their phones are Quad HD or potentially 4K, and all of the technology that we're moving towards is getting past 1080p. So it just makes sense to put 4K into a camera in this day and age. And Canon's lack of doing this is going to hurt them in the long run, because when people buy this $2,000 camera just so that they can have great stills and decent video, it's going to hurt them in the long run when they're posting 1080p video and that has gone the way of VHS. And people are looking at it like, whoa, that's not good enough for this day and age. Another issue I have with this camera is the price tag. $2,000 is not a bad entry-level full-frame DSLR, but if you look at the competition, the Nikon D750 has dual SD card slots, and the Sonys are making a wave in the DSLR mirrorless camera market because they are futurifying their devices. And the rumored A7 III is supposed to have 4K for less than $2,000, somewhere between $1,600 and $1,800. So the fact that you can save your money a little bit and buy a Sony camera is one thing, but you can also get a Nikon D750 right now that is cheaper and has better capabilities. And you could get like a refurbished A7R II or a refurbished 5D Mark III that's about the same price. And those cameras are more or less better than the 60 Mark II. So again, $2,000 for an entry-level full-frame DSLR seems like a little bit of a price hike. So my final thoughts on this camera. Is it a piece of garbage? No, it's not a piece of garbage. It's a high-end quality camera. But in this day and age, I don't think it's quite up to par. And I understand that Canon is focusing this camera as more of a stills camera opposed to video, but it is kind of disheartening to see that they pioneered DSLR video with a 5D Mark II and have kind of just stopped innovating in that sense. And that's where Sony has been really pushing the boundaries of technology in both video and photo with their mirrorless lineup. And I can only think that Sony is going to keep winning over people who want to invest in higher end cameras because these people know that they're buying into the future and not just the present. I hope you found this review helpful. My name's been Mark Steiner, and I will see you next time.